the computer. Yahoo! Well, hello, everyone. I'm thrilled. I'm always pretty thrilled, quite thrilled to do these Wholeness Hangouts. And this month, the premise for my being thrilled is not only that I get to be with you guys, but also that Jacqueline Hollows is our guest. And Jacqueline is someone whose work I've been aware of through the internet and through common circles in the world of the three principles and recovery. And I got a little closer glimpse of her when I was in Oslo last May and reached out, and she agreed to come talk about her work beyond recovery, helping people who are dealing with addiction, with mental illness, or who are in the criminal justice system to access their well-being and generate or connect with their own path of recovery. So let me see, I'm going to read your official bio or a bit. Jacqueline is the founder of Beyond Recovery, CIC, and this is just a little bit of what she says about her work in criminal justice. And she's just recently gotten some new contracts in the criminal justice system in the UK. Jacqueline writes, I've been working within the criminal justice system with support staff and inmates, sharing how our experience of life is created from our own minds. Through a fresh thought in any moment, a deeper level of common sense, connection, and resilience is always available. As people learn how their minds work, they are impacted in all sorts of wonderful ways. They get ideas about how to create businesses, how to heal relationships, and how to help others. People start to have new thoughts and no longer feel trapped in a particular belief system. They stop taking compulsive thought so seriously. They find solutions to problems they thought were intractable. People change in ways that are not possible through teaching techniques or systems. Even in prison, people are finding humor and connection and joy and peace of mind. If that is possible in one small section of one prison, the universal possibilities are limitless. So that's pretty darn inspiring, Jacqueline.
The sound of her.
Yeah, whoa. So would you that doesn't really tell us much though about who you are or kind of where you came from or where you're coming from now. Would you do a little of that for folks who may not know you?
Yeah, of course. Hello, everybody. And thank you so much for having me on this evening. It's really cool. Or this morning, whatever time it is for you guys. So my background is actually IT and business. So I'm not in the field, or I wasn't in the field of addictions or recovery or criminal justice at all, or mental health even. It was spreadsheets and project management and things like that. And all my education, all my work experience was in those fields for many years. And I had a number of personal life events that led me to sort of look at my life and say, what's going on? Am I enjoying life very much? And the answer was no.
Actually.
I had a really big job and a good salary and a great car and a beautiful apartment, and I'm a pretty optimistic person, so I was always sort of looking on the bright side of things, but I did find life a struggle, and I was a work hard and play hard type of a gal. So, I worked really, really hard, really long hours, and then I went out and partied really hard as well. And that lifestyle really took a toll on me and my relationships particularly. But I didn't know any other way. Like, that was just what I'd always done. My belief growing up was that I needed to prove myself and overcome things by working harder or being better. I remember as well my New Year's resolution every year for many years, from a child way into adulthood, was to be a better person. That was my New Year's resolution every year, and I never managed to achieve, my idea of what that looked like. So it gives you a sort of flavour of the internal struggle that I had all that time, although you might not have been able to tell on the outside. And that, and had lots of good times in there as well. I had lots of happy times and met lots of wonderful people. So it wasn't all bad. And then I had these experiences. I was made redundant. My father, I'd had 5 months with my father after many years of being apart, where he was dying from cancer, and we tried to have this relationship in this truncated amount of time, and so on and so forth. I was going through some financial difficulties, and I just took a long, hard look at myself and thought, what are you doing? And decided that I was going to try something different. So I actually went to Michael Neal's Super Coach Academy in LA, and that's where I fell across the 3 principles. But I didn't actually really like it very much when I heard about it. I was a bit resistant, let's say, and thought that it was some sort of a cult or something like that. And but I loved coaching, and I loved the idea that I could help people. So for quite a while after that, I got into coaching. I did executive coaching. I worked with people with stress and depression, and I met a lot of people in that journey as well who self-medicated. They sort of drank under pressure, or used prescription pills and so on. And I started to notice this correlation between when people basically were sort of driven, but yet they had to self-medicate to sort of live their lives and live this lifestyle. And I could see there was something not quite right about that why did we have to do that? And I was really fortunate. I met somebody who was in recovery from addictions. He was 3 years in recovery when I met him. And I was absolutely blown away. I was so inspired by him. He was he'd had a lifetime of drug and alcohol addictions, and he'd been in and out of prison the whole of his life, and yet here he was in his sort of early 40s, started a social enterprise, started teaching a non-profit company, teaching other people how to make films, making his own films as well, really good films, and just getting on with life. And he was just so inspiring, and I wanted to be involved with him and his company, so I volunteered for him. And I was just really lucky because I met loads and loads of people with different sorts of addictions and different sorts of lifestyles, and all I saw were these amazing people with absolutely incredible creativity and resilience and determination. And I could see more and more of all these beautiful people, but I could see that they didn't see that either. And I got really interested in the world of recovery. Is this okay? Do you want me to carry on?
Please,
yeah?
Please. And I just want to make a note to people. I've muted folks so that the picture doesn't keep switching back and forth from random background noise. But I definitely want to invite people to share comments and questions. So you can put things in the chat. You can make notes to save your thinking and ask a question in a minute after we get past this introductory piece. you know, I definitely want, unmute yourself, speak up. I don't mean to be quashing folks. I just want to quiet the background. So go ahead, my friend.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I got really interested in the world of recovery and what that meant and what the models were. So I did a lot of research. And as I say, you know, I wasn't originally from this world in terms of the working world, but I got to see that I just didn't feel that that what was going on was working so well. As in, I know that 12 steps works for people. I know different things work for people, but what I could see is that not everyone, and some people were actually swapping one set of beliefs for another. So they were no longer caught in their addictions, but they were living in this restricted world of what they called recovery, and that was sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes that was limiting them. So they were afraid to go and achieve, they were afraid to fail, they were afraid to relapse, and they felt enormous stigma. And I wanted to do something about that. I wanted to get rid of the stigma in the world, challenge it. And I wanted to challenge the way that recovery and addiction is treated and seen, especially in the UK, where it's criminalised, and people are stigmatised. And along my journey, I also got to see that we create our own stigma too. So I really wanted to sort of have a two-pronged attack where, you know, I broke down the barriers that were affecting people, but I helped people break out of their own prisons in their own mind too. And that sort of led me along the journey to where I started Beyond Recovery, which is another different little story. But I just wanted to pause in case anyone does want to speak up and is waiting for a pause.
Absolutely, thank you. So if you click on if you click on your own picture and see your microphone icon, you can unmute yourself there. And feel free to do that. You can raise your hand by clicking on the Manage Participants button at the bottom of your screen if you're on a computer. You can put something in the chat, or you can go like this, and I may or may not see you because I only have a few of you in a strip at the top. I've got Jacqueline on my big screen for the sake of the recording.
I'll see you. I've got everyone.
There you go. So feel free to speak up, or it looks like maybe you can go to part two.
There's a lady.
Oh,
yes.
Yep. Yes, Naomi.
Hi, hi, Jacqueline. Molly, thanks for organising this. I didn't quite know what I was joining, and when we started and we spoke, Molly, I was kind of going, have I ended up in, you know, a little group where I'm not meant to be? But it's lovely to be here, so thank you. Jacqueline, I love your work, and I watched your videos you did recently when you were going to the female prisons. You know, you did the little video blogs on your phone. And I guess what really, so I've just finished training as a facilitator with Ian Watson, and I saw you in London as well. And what really interests me, and I'd love to hear something you'd say, is just how you trust. So I guess, you know, the trust of wisdom, and how you, how it works for you to see it, to see beyond, to see the wisdom within people, and to see their, you know, their strength beyond everything else. I would love to hear you speak about that, I guess, some bit.
That's a great.
If that's okay.
That's great. It's great. Yeah. So my starting premise, what I've seen, what I absolutely know, is that everybody has wisdom and well-being, regardless to whether they know it and see it, and regardless to whether I know it and see it. So there's times you know, I'll confess there's times in group when I think, really? Surely not. Not often, but it does happen. But I absolutely know that is always the case, that everyone has wisdom, and therefore everyone has their own solutions. And how do I know that is, I guess, because I see it time and time again. So when I'm listening to people, I'm not listening for what I know. I'm listening to where I can see they're hearing their wisdom. So an example of that is, I might have a group. I work with men at the moment in men's prisons, and I work with a group of 10 men, let's say, and all of them will have different stories and different ways of expressing themselves and so on. And so recently, when I was in Liliana's group, Liliana's one of my facilitators running a group, and I sat in. There's a guy in the group who I've actually worked with him before. He's been on one of my groups before, and he's very noisy head. He's just constantly repeating his story over and over and over again, and he's hiding behind this sort of jokey exterior, you know, oh, I got really drunk at the weekend in prison, and you know, all this stuff's going on, and it's quite disruptive in a way, you know, sort of. And the week before, even, that I'd heard from the other facilitators and some of the men in the group, the peer mentors, that you know, he's taken over the group and he shouldn't be in there, and he's too noisy and so on. So I was really intrigued by this guy to see, like, where would he go. And Liliana's a brilliant facilitator, and she's the same. She has the hope for everybody, so she knows that it'll shine through at some point. And he was there, and he was going around his story, and one of the joys of working with these men is that they self-teach. So, for instance, one of the guys, you know, actually said to him, you know, it appears to me that you have a lot of negative stories, and that if you weren't living in those stories all the time, your life would be a bit better. Nice and simple, right? And but he wasn't really listening, and he was going on and on. And at some point during the end of the group, he said something like, oh, that's right, somebody else was talking about living in the now, and that he'd come to realise that he'd been living in the past. I mentioned this on the video. He'd been living in the past, and that was painful, but that now he's living in the future, and that's equally as painful, and that he really hadn't found the balance yet of living in the now, and that's what he was working on. And this guy said, I don't want to live in the now. And that was it, you see, because that's his wisdom. So I'm able to say to him, that's it. That explains everything, because you know you don't want to live in the now, so you're deliberately doing all these other things. So it doesn't look like, to me, it doesn't look like wisdom is like, oh, here's a great idea, and you go off and you do it, and it all works out beautifully. Wisdom is just what's constantly flowing through us. And for him right now, he didn't want to face the truth of being in prison. So that I'm able to point to him, that's it, that's your wisdom. That explains everything. It explains why you would go and get drunk. It explains why you're repeating your story. It explains why you're joking and you're not trying to take things in. And he was, and the way that when people hear their own wisdom pointed back at them, it's a very powerful body punch, body blow, you know. And he didn't know where to go with that. It just stopped him. Now, it's not to say, Naomi, that he will now go on and, you know, life will be beautiful or anything like that, but he's got a glimpse of, oh, even I have wisdom. And it doesn't sound like what I thought it might sound like. It's just this keeping me alive in the moment, flowing through me. Sometimes it looks like a beautiful idea. Sometimes it just looks like how to stay alive right now, how to keep myself safe, how to stop myself having panic attacks, or whatever it might be.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. It really does.
Thank you. It's so lovely because it's so easy to get ideas about what wisdom is and what it should look like and how it should play out in our own lives. I know that's happened for me, you know. And I shared with Molly, and I don't know if it's worth telling the story about the insight now, Molly.
Yes, perfect. I was just thinking about that.
And it sort of will answer your question even a bit deeper as well, Naomi, is that on the course of my journey in 2013, and some people may know about this already, is that I had an amazing experience. I was volunteering for the guy that I told you about in recovery. I was doing some interviews for him on a recovery walk in Birmingham, and it's a beautiful month, September, because people in all sorts of different stages of recovery celebrate being in recovery and what recovery means, and offer hope to other people that people can and do recover. And it's wonderful. It's a month of celebration, really. And I was interviewing people for a film that my guy was making. And I walked into the park where the recovery walk was ending, and I was hit by a massive feeling of love for everyone in the park. I was overwhelmed with this feeling of joy and love, and being in love with all these people and who had all these different addictions, and they'd been in prison, and I just wanted to love them. And I knew in that moment that I had something that could help those people, and that was what I needed to do. And in a way, I can remember sort of thinking I needed to get over myself and just get on with it. And it was amazing. It was a really beautiful, amazing experience. And my organisation Beyond Recovery was born then, because that's when I spoke to someone that day. He said, come and speak to my recovery group in Coventry. I went along to that. I worked with people for the next 18 months, free of charge, whoever came along, and helped a lot of people. And sort of, I call it a pilot now. When I'm talking to businesses, I did a pilot, but really, I was just sort of bumbling along and seeing, and things were coming through me. I was talking about the inside out nature of life, and it's been a wonderful experience. And I've just been, someone on here talked about walking in the feeling, and that's what I was doing. I was walking in the feeling of this experience. And then in 2015, I joined the 3PGC, and they do vetting on you when you join them. And so I had an interview with somebody, and he vetted me, and I told him all my experience of not liking the principles and this thing that happened to me. And he said, that was a beautiful insight. It was so good that you didn't like the principles initially, because when you were going to get hit, you were going to get hit big. Well, I didn't know that was an insight. And I was so gobsmacked. I thought that was an insight. I didn't know that was an insight. Is that what an insight is? So I've been doing this work, right? It's December 15 by now. I've been doing this work for, 2 years plus. And I didn't know that was an insight in the park. So I was like blown away. It was amazing, and a wonderful experience hearing this. So I carry on. And then in June of this year, I went to Salt Spring Island So in June 16, 6 months later, I'm a slow learner, right? In June 16, I went to Salt Spring Island. And on the first day, I realised that feeling in the park was me. I created that feeling. It was mine. I didn't know that. I thought that happened to me. So even with all the work that I do and all the lives that I touch, I didn't know that feeling was through me, was mine. I thought, I didn't really think about it. I just thought it was an amazing experience. And then I was like, oh, that was an insight. But it's almost like I thought it was something that came into me. And coming to the realization that I was that feeling, I'm mine, and that was me, was immense for me, because it was so powerful. I think when I talked to Molly about it, Molly said, well, yeah, because then there's no sell by date, it's not going to run out because it's you. So when you know it's you, the pressure's off. But one of the reasons for sharing that story with people is that I've just done what I knew to do, even though I didn't know what it meant always. So I don't always know that it's wisdom, or I don't always trust. I just do wherever I am in that moment. And I'm a lot slower than most people, but 3 years in, I found out that it's a wisdom and it's insight that's coming through me. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, I'd love to know how that lands with folks and what it prompts in you, either what questions or insights. Quiet group. You can unmute yourself or wave at us.
This is Anne.
Hi, Anne.
I was just swimming in the lake before this call, and I have that feeling almost every other day. I have that feeling of I am love and just loving everything. I don't think I ever saw it as me. I just saw it as God coming through me. But, since I am God, it is me. It is my higher self. Yes, I can relate to that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. Yeah, lovely. Lovely. I'm reminded of many conversations I've had with Barb Patterson. And I don't remember exactly how Barb puts this, but basically she just lives in the conviction that mind or something, God, each of us may have a different word for it, but that something has her back. And it's that sense of being part of, held by, made of the same energy that fuels life. And it's a lovely feeling when you experience it. Jacqueline, something that's really playing for me is the role of love. And I'm not talking about romantic love or love as approval or love as liking or as a personal positive feeling toward people. But that love that you felt in the park, for example, that just seems to be so foundational. And I was watching your little daily video today on Facebook when you talked about well-being being the foundation of everything. And I thought, yeah, I agree. And it looks to me like the love that you move in, the love, that very spacious, impersonal, inclusive love has something to do with whether or not we're able to point people effectively toward their own well-being. Does that make sense to you?
Makes perfect sense to me. I haven't ever thought about it in that way, so thank you for that, because that I love the way you put that. So it makes perfect sense, because when I started working in the sex offenders prison, prior, I've just done one group in there. Prior to working with those guys, you know, I've had 12 months odd of working with my other guys who I love and I've got so much hope for, and so on. And just prior to going in, I was aware that I had some noise going on, and I couldn't really put my finger on it. I wouldn't give it much credence, you know. I wouldn't have sort of gone down any lines with it or anything like that, but I was aware that it was going on. And you know, I know enough to just sort of get over myself and let it be, and, you know, see what experience happens next. And we went in because I like to sort of go and see them before they start the group, and we went in to see them, and I discovered, oh right, they're the same. Like it's okay. Like I'm cool with this, and that was good. But actually, and I wasn't even aware of it, is that when we started the group, we do a 2.5 day group. So with them all day for 2 days, and then half a day on the third day. And when we started the group, I wasn't aware of this background noise. And putting it in your words, I wasn't walking around with such a big cloak of love. You know, I'd shrunken down. And the experience was great. You know, people were sort of getting settled down, different things were happening, but they weren't clicking like I've seen before. They weren't popping. And on the third day, you know, I was thinking, oh, is it because it's a new prison, and, you know, the sort of the 3 principles aren't in the consciousness of the prison, and is it this, and what can I do differently? And, you know, I was exploring all these avenues, and my colleague, Paul Locke, said, well, you know, it's the first group and it's fine, it's good, there's nothing wrong, they're settled, it's all fine. And we walked into that room, and one of the men said to me, he said, oh my God, I don't have to be unhappy. I've come to realise I don't have to be unhappy. And the feeling that he said that with knocked me for 6. You know, it completely, like, just ran straight through me like 2 love trains smacking into each other, and it exploded within me, and it exploded within him, because he you know, he said, I'm getting all goosebumps, and you could see he was different and I was different. And all of a sudden, the cloak fell away, and all of a sudden I loved everyone in the room. I was with them, I loved them, I had hope for them. And, you know, it's no surprise. They all started popping like popcorn. So I see what you're saying, and I can relate it to that in that way, is that as soon as I fell into that space and fell into that place where we're all the same and we're all one, they were able to fall into it too. And they might have even already been there. It's just that I wasn't experiencing it.
Yeah. Lovely.
You know, and a question that just popped into my mind is, so what kind of conversations are you having with folks? You know, it's related to the what are you doing, or what do you have people do? But but I've been around the block enough to know that the doing isn't quite it. But what are the conversations you're having? What is going on in your teaching, your workshops, that facilitates recovery for people, whether it's with addiction or in the criminal justice system, sex offenders, mental health, mental illness?
So we have all sorts of conversations and lots of stuff comes into the room. But regardless to whether it's me or any of my team, we are always bringing that back to what is true about life, what is true about us as human beings. And we're basing our conversation around that on two things. Is that one is life works from the inside out 100% of the time. So no matter how it looks in the moment, this is true. And that well-being is innate. So we as human beings have everything that we need inside of us in any given moment, in any given situation, and that is constantly available to us 24/7. And no matter where the conversations go, and they do go, we're bringing that back to those 2 points. Like you can either see it or you can't in that moment, and it can look like different things. So we might talk about feelings, you know, and feelings that we try to run away from, or feelings that we like experiencing, and bring that back in. Or we might talk about something that's occurred, you know, some event that's occurred to people. And oftentimes we're just going with the flow, really, remaining in the grounding of those 2 key points, and going with whatever's coming up and bringing it back to there. So I found, you know, in my work, that grounding is almost as important as love that you talk about, because the love feeling is that the knowing that we're all the same and that we're absolutely connecting on a soul level.
Mm-hmm.
And the grounding is staying there.
Yeah.
So whenever it goes off track and they get noisy, or even I might get ideas and then I realize, oh, I'm in my ideas and I'm not in my grounding. The key to facilitation, I feel, is going back there, because everyone gets lost.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter. If you know you've got lost, you can bring it back. And I've just noticed that, and everyone wants to go with you. So they want to go into that. I've referred to it before as a beautiful lagoon, and that reminds me of what Anne just said, you know, about swimming in her beautiful water. They want to go there. So when they get into their heads, as I might call it, or they get noisy, all I'm really doing is inviting them to come back here. And most of the time they want to come.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different level of conversation from there.
Right. Well, that certainly makes sense to me and matches my experience teaching and doing group coaching with the principals. And sometimes, in fact, virtually every time that I have a group session, I come out going, what happened? and yet there's this sense, and I wish sometimes that I had a more concrete framework or structure to put around it, because I understand people's desire to grab onto something. But as best I can describe it, the feeling gets nicer. People get quieter, they settle down. And as we keep looking at those 2 key points you brought up, that life always works from the inside out, and that everyone does have innate well-being all the time. And I generally explicitly bring in this idea of love because I find that's often the elephant in the room, or the missing piece, that people are stuck in the conviction they don't have well-being. And yet when they start to explore the possibility that they are actually loved and accepted as human beings, they recognize how they've created a wall against their well-being. But anyway, so I tend to bring in the love piece. And it reminds me of a phrase that George Pransky uses all the time, which is all boats rise with the tide. And as best as I can explain it, what happens in the room is that the tide comes in. And as the tide comes in, we have different conversations. The boats go different places. We have different particular specific topics. But what's really changing is this. It's not what's happening on the surface of the water. Anne.
Yes, today I'm in a happy day, but I have I was before going through a pattern of despair one day and happiness the other. I've corrected a lot of that with some work I'm doing with a coach. I still, like yesterday, I don't feel like I'm the same person. No matter where I am, when I wake up in that day, like yesterday, I just can't find happiness. I mean, I do love myself, and I know I should love all parts of me, and I do as best I can, and I try to have compassion for that unhappy part. I just don't know how to raise the tide on those days.
And why is it important to raise the tide?
I want to be happy all the time.
Yeah, me too.
It's so good when I'm here, and I love everything, and I feel like the God of me, and I feel we're supposed to feel like the God of me all the time. And I know in my head that God came here for all experiences. I just would choose not to have the Hitler experience.
Yeah. I'd just as soon not be the one that's having God's depressed experience today.
Exactly, the despair.
Yeah. But you know, the image I just got, Anne, and this is an image for me, is of me standing on the beach at low tide, on maybe a beach that has there's a beach around here that has some algae and plankton that are particularly smelly. I mean, they really smell like raw sewage at low tide. They're perfectly safe, but they're just stinky as all get out. And I'm standing on that beach, and I'm wishing the tide would come in, and I'm wishing the tide would come in, and I'm missing the fact that the tide's going to come in whether or not I wish for it, and I can, deal with it however I choose. But that the tide being out really is never a problem. And with you, I often prefer to have the tide in.
Thank you. That helps.
Yeah.
Can I point to something that I heard when you were speaking, Molly?
Yes.
Which is you can bring in love to the room when you run your groups, because that's something you've seen for yourself.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Molly's still there.
I am. Can you hear me?
Ah, yes. You were frozen on mine then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So one of the things is staying true to what you know, isn't it?
Yes.
And so if I was to and I'm just bringing this out because this comes up with facilitators and when we're working together and so on. So it may be useful. But if I was to then go, oh yeah, that thing that Molly said, that was great. I love that thing that Molly said, because it was great. It was beautiful. Because it's not true for me. It's not what I've seen for myself. That's a situation where I'd be talking from something that looks like a good idea.
Yes.
And that's what I would encourage anybody is talking about this or sharing this with others, is really only share what you know, what you've seen for yourself, what you know to be true, what you've seen has changed in your life, what's made, total sort of sense, or total, not even total sense beyond that, what's really impacted you, and you see that is true, even if it's one tiny thing, because that's way more impactful than sharing other people's ideas, no matter how great they are.
Exactly. And even for me, my in the moment realization of previous insights varies like crazy. Yeah. Sometimes I see it, and sometimes I remember seeing it. Yeah. And when I speak from my memory of an insight, not so helpful. Yeah. And yet I found that it can be really useful to share that fluctuation with people. And that frees them then not to be measuring their own insights against mine, or their insights against the insights they had yesterday. Because I've definitely got into the insight grading business.
Yeah.
It's not very helpful.
And then this is probably a different way of saying what you said previously about love, but that being yourself and being raw, vulnerable, true, however you might want to call it, has a massive impact on the people that you're working with, because they feel it.
Yes.
So people know, don't they, when you're being true, they know at some level, and whatever we want to call that, which I know people call it different things, I know that they know. And I've seen more and more, no matter whether I'm off my grounding or in fear or in love or whatever. So I could be with the sex offender group for 2 days and not be in my total loving self, because I was still being true. I wasn't faking. I wasn't pretending anything. I was where I was at in that moment. And no one ever minds that, and people connect with that. There's a real deep sense of connection, because that gives them permission to be themselves.
Right. And it strikes me that one of the healing and transformative aspects of traditional 12-step recovery is the degree to which people are just themselves and coming from where they actually are. And that was always, for me, a powerful part of that experience of being with people. There's a line that I've heard in the 12 steps, and it just happens to circle back around to love. Let us love you until you can love yourself. But there's also in that this sense of, as people in those rooms are living in acceptance of themselves and of their past and of their present, and laughing and free and easy and open and vulnerable, that frees other people who are feeling ashamed or limited or broken to begin to imagine the possibility that, if she really was where she says she was, and she sounds like that and feels like that, then maybe there's hope for me. Yeah. And then they can start to look inside themselves and find it. So
there's a man who's waving at us.
Oh,
Greg.
Yes. Great.
Hi. I was driving in my car earlier, so I couldn't really join in when you were talking about your experience that you'd had, your big insight, and the feeling that you had of the overwhelming, just that feeling that everything's already okay. And it's, when you were saying that, it really hit me, because that's exactly what I experienced almost 4 years ago. And that was the day that I completely lost the desire to get drunk or high anymore. And I spent 2.5 years trying to find out what happened to me. And what I unfortunately was being told in the rooms of AA was that what I felt was dangerous, and I was going to get drunk and die because of it. And fortunately, I managed to find a few people here and there within the rooms who were understanding, and were trying to help point me in a better direction. And eventually it all ended up leading to me finding, I think Bob Shell's on this call too, ran into him at my church. He was running a 3 principles group that was just starting, and as I got into the principles, I realized that it explained everything that I felt on that day, and I realized that, like you said, what I'd experienced was me, and not this personal me, but the me that's also you. That connection that we all have is really what I'd experienced. And I've been trying very hard to, I wouldn't say trying very hard, but I'm trying to bring that experience to others within the program who were like me, who were kind of, seeking something a little different, kind of got to the point where it's like, okay, this is great, but what now? And so I started a 3 principles based AA group back in January, and it's been there's been some really good things that have come of it, but it's been a really huge struggle. And what I'd like to kind of hear from you, if you could, is how do you handle the people who are so well, I don't even know exactly how to put it, but I guess so well indoctrinated into AA that even though they're not happy, they don't believe there's another way. They're so stuck in that mind frame of the 12 steps. I meet quite a few people who are really not happy and they'll even admit it, but what they say is that I just must not have worked the steps thoroughly enough yet. So maybe the 30th time that I work the steps is going to be the time. How would you approach somebody like that? Does that make sense?
Is that for me or Molly? Is that for me?
For Jackie?
Yeah.
Or Molly, either one, or both.
I'm going to take a spin, and if I have some startling thing to add, I will.
So it's a great question, Greg. So first of all, I don't concern myself with what else people are doing, whether they're doing 12 steps, whether they're doing religion, whether they're doing EFT, whatever else is going on in their lives is their business. And I don't concern myself with that or even talk to it. And I have them all, I have the 12 steppers in the group, and I have people of all different religions who are very, very attached to their religions, and all sorts of diversity. My understanding of the 3 principles is that it is the foundation of everything. So the 3 principles are in the 12 steps. The 3 principles are in Islam. The 3 principles are in Buddhism, because it's the understanding of life. It's how life works. So people, and I'm thinking of a client right now who was very much, as you describe, wanted to, that's all she knew was the 12 steps, but she knew it didn't work either. And we worked together. So she in parallel came to see me and did her 12-step program. And at some point in her journey, and I never had a comment on that, if she wanted to bring 12-step or discussion into our discussion, I could talk about it neutrally because I don't have an opinion on it. So I could assist her with that sort of juxtaposition, if you like, because I'm neutral about it. And at some point during her journey, she said, I never ever think about having a drink except for when I go to a meeting. So she said, so it doesn't make sense to go to a meeting anymore. And she stopped. She had to come to that herself. So I see it that I'm not in the job of persuasion or convincing people. I see it that I'm in the job of listening, pointing in a helpful direction wherever they are, and allowing them to find their own space and their own solutions, whatever that might look like. And that might look like actually religion works with this, or 12 steps works with this, or whatever it is. If I'm teaching a facilitator, that's a different matter, because for me, teaching the purity of the principles is the key. So I would be talking about that, and if somebody wanted to amalgamate something, then they could go and do that, but they couldn't work for me. But if I'm working with a client, I'm neutral about it all, because I see that it underpins everything. It underpins Slimmer's world, like whatever it is that we do in life, it underpins, because the three principles are us. Does that answer the question, Greg?
What I'm more interested in is when somebody's actually coming at me, like, how is this better than the steps, or different than the steps, or whatever? And I really don't know how to answer that without saying that it's part of the steps. I mean, I say that and people just don't get it, and they tend to get angry. And I'm not going to stop sharing it.
With 30 some years of history with the 12 steps, I just don't have I don't usually have a problem with people not liking it or not getting it. I don't need other people to get it. And I answer differently depending on the person I'm speaking to. It doesn't often come up anymore. It came up for me more often in my early days in the principle, when I realized there was something in my thinking that was polarizing. And I found myself in polarizing conversations, which just doesn't happen now, because I don't see any conflict between the steps and the principles. I see people working the steps or thinking about the steps in ways that gets them cornered, but that's not inherent in the steps. And if I see people in the three principles who are not presumably doing anything else, working themselves into a corner using the principles. So one, if nobody's asking for my help, I don't give it. And if they want to know the difference between A and the principles, I might say something like, it looks to me like the principles point to and explain why the program works when it works. Because they're pointing to the underlying well-being, resilience, and wholeness of the human spirit. They're pointing to the way that we create our world through mind, consciousness, and thought. And the difference is that it's like the principles are the basis. It's the difference, it's the difference between a theoretical underpinning, philosophical underpinning of all of life, and an application that has been developed. And I just don't have any problem with people using whatever application makes sense to them. And if they want to have a deeper understanding of why that application works or doesn't, I'm all over that conversation. But I don't need to convince anyone. And I have many, many friends who are still active in the program. And from time to time, I go to a meeting for whatever reason, and it doesn't raise my hackles or confuse me, because there's just not a conflict.
And that same conversation could be had with, what's the difference between the principles and CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, or what's the difference between the principles and mindfulness, or it's the same. It's exactly the same thing. And one thing that I would add to that, I love Molly's answer there, and the thing that I would add to that is that really what we're doing is listening to people and finding out, unearthing their wisdom wherever they're going, whatever that looks like, and nothing to do with what we're trying to show them, if you like, or get them to get.
Right. So I know Anne has her hand up again, and we're just about at time. I know it's it's Friday night for Jacqueline, so I don't want to keep her too long, but I just wanted to acknowledge Anne.
And there's
Yes,
another
thank you.
lady as well.
I just one quick thing when we were talking way back, what I got that helps me to be, and I was talking to my friend Judith, and it was like just being present. If I'm present, and maybe that's the answer for me too, is to be present with myself wherever I am in the same way I am with others. That's what I came up with.
Yeah.
Thank you. The presence is the thing. When I'm truly present, everything seems to be okay.
That's lovely.
Lovely.
Well, there's Lester. He's got a hand up. She's had it up.
Okay, Lester, where are you, Lester? There.
My name's actually Debbie. It's just the computer's.
Oh, that's-
Yeah, just a quick question. I'm just curious. Do you obviously speak to the inmates at the prisons? Do you also speak to the staff? Because I'm just kind of thinking that when you were saying how you went into that group of sex offenders and how you weren't quite in the right frame of mind, I'm just thinking, well, if the staff have got background chatter going along, even though they're with the inmates every day, if they have understanding of the three principles, then they would then be approaching the inmates in a completely different frame of mind, and that in itself would help turn things around.
Absolutely, yeah, we do. We generally the business model is to work with the staff, the support staff as well, to raise awareness, and then we work with the inmates.
And then do you find that they talk with each other about it, or help each other along, when you're not there, or you don't hear about that? Or
yes, definitely, yeah, definitely. And they explore it more together. Yeah, it's really helpful. It's really helpful because even though it might be just a little bit of understanding that the staff have, because we just do a short program with them, it's enough for them to be pointing in this direction. And it helps for referrals, because then they know more of how to talk about the principles. But it also helps with when men are struggling and they don't want to come back for some reason. It helps that conversation, and it helps for the staff because they can see what's changed. Because sometimes we have very, very powerful transformations, but sometimes they're very subtle, and it helps the staff be able to notice that as well. So it's a great combination. Absolutely right, Debbie.
Excellent, brilliant. Yeah, I'm very intrigued by all your work.
Thank you.
I've got a brother who works in the prisons, and so that's why I'm kind of quite interested.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, Jacqueline, thank you so much for being here. I feel like we could go on for another hour easily. How do people find out more about your work or get in touch with you?
So we have a website, which is www.beyond-recovery.co.uk, and I'm very active on Facebook. There's a Facebook page and a journal page, which some people have been watching. Thank you, because I've been doing little video updates of the work. I'm also quite active on Twitter, which is @beyond_recovery. So people can email me through any of those means, contact me through any of those means. And if anybody wants help with stuff, I'm happy to share any information. It's a research project, so once the research is out, you're all welcome to have that as well. So yeah, really, really happy to help anybody.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to unmute everyone so we can have a Robin's group goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye. Love you all.
Love you.
Bye. I love you.
Bye-bye.
And this recording will be up in a couple of hours, so let your friends know and your colleagues know.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Mom.